All right, folks, welcome everyone. This is day 2 of how to use Focus Build to accelerate your SAP S/4HANA projects or any implementation projects for that matter. What I'll do today is do a quick recap of day 1 and then jump into the demo, which we couldn't finish on day 1, and then move forward into the discussions for the rest of Focus Build. Let me just check. There seem to be some chat messages. Hopefully nothing important. Okay, we'll come back to the questions in a while. Okay, so what did we cover on day 1? We looked at Solution Manager and ALM strategy from SAP, the fact that they both together accelerate the SAP S/4HANA implementations and provide a lot of transparency and a lot of automation for your projects. We also covered that Focus Build and Focus Insights, which are part of an add-on on top of Solution Manager, are now included in the Solution Manager usage rights, which means that there is no additional license to any of the topics that we covered on day 1 and day 2. Focus Build also supports Agile methodology, which we will cover a little bit more in detail today when we talk about build management, later part of our session. Then we looked at process management a little bit in detail, where we looked at the modeling tool, how it's available in Solution Manager, and the fact that we recommend you start with best practice content that is coming from Activate or SAP model companies as a baseline. We also talked about how process management is the bedrock for everything that we do in Solution Manager and Focus Build. We will also see how that gets leveraged through and through the project, starting with requirements management, which we will show in a demo today. In the requirements management, we did cover an overview of what requirements are, how are they captured, and what are the different workflows that we have in terms of the different statuses of the requirement, which we will also see in the demo. But more importantly, this relationship is something that you all have to remember, the process structure to requirement to work package to work items. And this is something that we will see today as well in our first demo, where we start to create a requirement against a business process structure that exists in the Solution Manager system, right? That was the recap, and we will now jump into the demo, which we were supposed to finish on day 1. So I'll quickly go through some of the demos regarding how we create requirements and how we track requirements and how we report on requirements, the requirements backlog using the solution readiness dashboard. Yeah. With that, let me jump. For some reason, my escape isn't working. Okay, hope you're able to see my screen. What we'll do is we will start with the solution documentation window. So we have gone through this yesterday, where we had different branches. So we'll start in the design branch, where we have a whole bunch of business processes that are documented here. We will go through some of the processes for end-to-end processes, which we have been predefined. What I will look at is the procure-to-pay process, and then go into procure-to-pay standard. And then I see a whole bunch of process steps. If I see something like create purchase order, and then in the related document section here, which is on the attributes pane, you will see how many requirements have been assigned, how many work packages have been assigned, and so on and so forth. And this is your starting point to create requirements against a process step. You could also do that from the diagram. For example, you can then go to the process diagram for create purchase procure to pay, and then start the requirement creation from there. For some reason, my screen is a bit hanging. Let me just restart this. You could also start from the process diagram or from the process structure. And on day 1, we looked at the fact that requirements could be created either in the library itself or from the process structure. And right now we are looking at creating requirements from the process structure. You could also create them directly at the library stage, or you could also create it either the process step level or process level as well, right? So these are the elements in which we can create the requirements. For some reason it's not starting. Let me just go back and then bring up my solution documentation all over again. Again, I'm using the same internet demo system for which I will share the link as well, but you could also find it on Support Marketplace. Let me see if this helps in relaunching the solution documentation. All right. While this loads, let's just jump to how do we track requirements. Let's say we have created a bunch of requirements. And for requirements tracking within the solution readiness dashboard, and we will come back to this dashboard over and over again as we go along, understanding different aspects of focus build. In the requirements tracking, we use the requirement style, right? And here we have a few KPIs that are being shown, number of requirements which are unassigned, number of requirements to be scoped, number of requirements in progress, and number of requirements completed. Yeah, and this is how we've prepared the tile for you in the readiness dashboard for a project manager to track or an architect to track what's happening with requirements, right? And unassigned requirements are those requirements which have not been assigned to any wave, or sorry, any work package, because requirements has to be converted to a work package so that they can be scoped and then work can be done and they can be realized. Yeah. So these are requirements which have just been created and possibly approved, and then nobody has picked them up, right? So that's the backlog essentially. So we have 24 in this demo system, 24 such requirements. And then 2 requirements are approved and they have to be scoped, and work packages have been created, but they have not been scoped, which means that work items have not been created. Work has really not started on these requirements. And then 41 of these requirements are in progress, which means that work packages have been created, work items have been created, and some one or the other developers are working or architects are working on these work items. That's what in progress means. And completed means the development has been completed and testing has been done. In essence, the requirement has been realized and ready to be released to production. Yeah. So let's look at the unassigned requirement. If that loads, for some reason the system is hanging. So it does work only one application at a time. So if solution documentation is still loading, then the readiness dashboard doesn't work. So let me just see this. So now we've gone into the unassigned requirements. These are all the unassigned requirements. You can see, you can review them. They are all in status unassigned. They are all with different priorities. And you can see that there are some very high ones. Obviously, these are things that you need to work with your developers. And when you click on this ID here, it will launch the requirements management application in Focus Build with that particular requirement loaded, right? So you can directly take some action here. You can approve this, you can reject it, you can take action on this directly by launching from the readiness dashboard, which means that we started at a very high level, gone into requirements which are unassigned, picked a specific requirement, and then once we pick the requirement, we go into the requirements management Fiori application. And you see here, it launched the My Requirements app with that specific requirement, which is to be approved. We can take action here. For example, I want to approve this, then I can execute, and then now it's approved, right? So once the requirement is approved, only then you can create work packages and scope some work to be done. So there is an approval step to the requirement before it could be realized, right? So there is a workflow behind it. And there are, of course, authorizations for people who have access to these requirements, users who will have access to approving the requirements and so on and so forth. So those are all authorization controlled as well. So that's how you track requirements and then even take actions against it. So it's not just about static reporting where you just show a number and say these are the unassigned requirements, but you can actually drill down and then take actions against it as well if you wish, right? So that's the philosophy behind this readiness dashboard as well. So the same thing you could do for any of the other types of requirements as well. You can then look at all the requirements in progress and then track the requirements from there as well, right? There are other ways to track the requirements as well. For example, when you are logged in, you have various other apps that you see. For example, under Focus Build Architect, you can see the My Requirements app. This is a similar app that we have seen when we launched it from Solution Readiness Dashboard, but then here you see all the requirements, not just one specific requirement, right? You see all the requirements where you are either a creator or you are assigned to it and so on and so forth. So here I'm logging in with the Agatha user. So which means that I'm seeing the requirements which are under the control of Agatha as a user. and you see all the requirements. You can jump to a requirement, take actions, and then so on and so forth, right? So this is what you can do with My Requirements app. So this is one app that is quite handy. Oops, I closed the window. I shouldn't have. Should have just gone back to home. Let me just launch Solution Manager Launchpad again. So we've seen the solution readiness dashboard to track the requirements. We've seen the My Requirements app. There's one more which I would like to show. If I go back to the architect view, which is the Mass Change app. Where is that? Where you can actually go to the requirements management app and then search for requirements as well, right? So here you can search based on priority, based on what are the requirements that are approved, created by, and all the different attributes of a particular requirement, right? And then you click search, and then you will see all the requirements here, and then you can do a mass selection here and then go to the mass change app. So this mass change app is quite handy because this app allows you to change status en masse, which means that especially when you want to approve a bunch of requirements together, you have done a analysis of all the requirements, and then you want to approve all the requirements together, then you can use the mass change app. And this mass change app also works for work packages and work items as well. Fortunately, it's still loading. So mass change app is also quite useful from that context. Now, let me just go back to home. For some reason, my system is not helping me so much today. Let me just launch it one more time and see if we are able to create the requirement using solution documentation one last time, which is quite important because that's the starting point, how you create requirements. All right, let's see if this works. We are in the operations branch. Let me jump to the design branch. And then go into my favorite purchase order step. So as you can see, you can also add steps to your favorites, which is easy for navigation. So I'm directly jumping to my purchase order step. And then I want to now create a requirement for purchase orders. So I go down and then see the related documents here and then click on requirements. And I see that already 2 requirements have been assigned to this purchase order step, right? So these are the 2 requirements that have already been assigned, and these are the ones that I have been creating just before the demo to show you how requirements can be created. Now I want to create another one. So I go into the bottom requirement button here and then say I want to create a new requirement if it opens. So for some reason, this is extremely slow. Okay, so now I have to go to my fallback on to the Explore phase. Demo. And show you a recorded demo instead, because this isn't working here. So I'll show a recorded demo of how to create a requirement. By the way, all of these recorded demos are also accessible to you from our support marketplace. So let me just jump through this demo. So we will go back to the solution documentation view, click on requirements link here under the related documents tab. And this opens up the requirements management app. And as you can see, 3 requirements are already there. I click on the requirements button here and say, I want to create a new requirement. So when I do that, when you create a new requirement, a tile appears, a form appears where you can give the description and so on and so forth. Most important thing for you to note here is that the solution branch and element, which is in this case, sales order process, is already assigned here. And if our demo was working, this would be the create purchase order, which I was trying to create against. Now you give a description, some priority, and you can give, if you already know who's going to work on it, you can already assign it to a business process expert. You can give a category against this, and you can give some description. What is also useful are 2 additional optional attributes here, what we call as value points and effort points. This essentially signifies what is the potential value that the business users will generate out of this requirement if you realize this requirement, and also what would be a, an estimate for the effort that it would take to actually realize. Now, this balance between value and effort is what you could use to actually prioritize your backlog as well. And these attributes are available for you when you search for requirements and so on and so forth. So you can actually pick ones which are having higher value versus and lower effort and so on and so forth. So these two attributes could be quite handy. Another attribute which is also, you could also now attach something here. In this demo, we are uploading a requirements description document for sales order processing, and that document is uploaded against this particular requirement as well. And this will be available to all architects later on if they want to look at the use case document here. Then once it is uploaded, you are saving it, and now you have created your requirement. As you can see earlier, we had 3 requirements, now we have 4. And then these 4 requirements are all assigned against the same business process that we started with. So when you refresh this particular URL, you will see that from 4, the requirements have now become 4, right? And then of course, we don't have any work packages or work items in this case. Yeah, so that's how you create requirements in the requirement. Oh, now I can see my screen. So we are back on live demo. So when I click on create requirement, I see the same form which we've seen in the recorded demo. Let me just quickly create one more. Just I wanted to show you a couple of more attributes. Demo requirement 5 and some priority. And value points, I'd say this one has 50 points of value on a scale of 100, and effort is 100, right? Another attribute I wanted to show you is the classification, which is important because this dictates a lot of things downstream, whether this requirement is identified as a gap in the software. Is it a RICEF that needs some work to be done? Is it a fit, which means that some customization or configurations have to be changed? Or is it a non-functional requirement? Now, this classification dictates what kind of documentation is mandated for the work to be done. For example, if it's a RICEF and if it's an interface type of a RICEF, then it expects an interface guide for that particular work package because this requirement is of the type RICEF. If it's a fit, then it expects a configuration guide. If it's a gap, then you can send it back to SAP as a software gap and so on and so forth, right? So this classification is also quite important. Another thing which could be useful also is the categorization. So we have a multi-level categorization which you can configure while you are setting up Focus Build to categorize your requirements as functional, non-functional. Under functional, you can say ERP. Under ERP, you can say it's related to FI. Now, this category is also sent downstream, which means that when you create a work package out of this requirement, then the category that you've put for this particular requirement is also inherited into the work package as well. Right? So that's something that we will see in the later part of the demo. So that was requirements management. With a bit of hiccups, we were able to see how to create a requirement and how to do tracking of these requirements using the solution readiness dashboard, the My Requirements app, as well as the mass change app, which did not load, but that's something that you can use to make mass changes to the requirements. Yeah. Now let's jump into the rest of Focus Build, right? So we have now seen process management, created some process structures, then created some requirements. And now we will see how to realize these requirements using various capabilities within Focus Build, which is what we call as build management. So as I mentioned before, Focus Build tracks projects and then has release management where you can actually go live with multiple projects together, which means that you can define multiple projects which are all going live on a single date. They will all belong to the same release, right? So you can have sub-projects, something related to master data as one project, something related to cloud integrations as another project, something related to the core S/4HANA as another project, and then all of them will go live on a specific date, and they will all fall under the same release. And that's the idea of the release management, which we will see in detail as we go along. But here, right now, it's important to understand that Focus Build expects you to follow a release calendar, define a release date, and then everything that you do within the build is preparing you for that release. So which means that all work packages will be assigned to a release, all work items will be assigned to a release eventually, and then they'll all be part of a release so that they will all go live, so that solution manager knows what all is being done for this particular release. All work that is being done in this release is bundled together into this release, is packaged together in this release, right? So release management is quite important, and we will see how releases work in the release management capability. And another important thing to understand is that focus build also allows you to split your build phase into waves and sprints. Now, it's not mandatory that you need to follow Agile to use focus build, but it does recommend you to divide your project build phase, especially into waves and sprints. Now, what are waves, right? So waves are approximately 8 to 12 weeks duration, work to be done in that particular wave, work packages are assigned to this wave. And the idea for us would be that this is something where at the end of that 8 to 12 weeks, you have a touch and feel session with the business, which means that the business can come in and do a little bit of playing around with the system, or even do a round of acceptance testing, right? So that's the idea behind the wave, right? And then each wave can then be subdivided into sprints, where these are much shorter, 2 to 3 weeks at most, or 4 weeks at most. And then these sprints essentially are where the work items are assigned, and the work items or the developers are working in these sprints. And then at the end of the sprint, we expect that there is something like a show and tell, where you show to business something that you have developed and then seek early feedback, right? So here, as you can see, we're trying to bring in the agile concepts of continuous feedback, early involvement of business into a large SAP implementation. And this is what I call as pragmatic agile, right? Because this is the most pragmatic way to bring in the agile aspects to a large implementation like SAP S/4HANA, for example. Right? So focus build allows you to create these waves and sprints within your project, and then every work package needs to be assigned to a wave, and every work item needs to be assigned to a sprint, right? So this is the realization part of the requirements, right? So requirements have been created. They are a backlog of requirements that you need to realize. But then once it gets real into the build phase, into the realization phase, we need to see which work packages go in which wave and which work items go in which sprint within that particular wave, and so on and so forth, right? So waves and sprint concept is important. So as I mentioned, wave is a well-defined functional scope of work packages that needs to be done, right? So again, you can think of a wave to say that, okay, I will do all the work packages related to order to cash in this wave. And then I'll pick up procure to pay, and then pick and look at everything that needs to be done for procure to pay later on in the second wave, right? That's one way of defining your waves. Or you can say in the first wave, I will do all the configurations, IMG activities. And the second wave, I'll pick up all developments. In the third wave, we will do all the integrations, right? So you can choose how you want to define your wave, but it's a well-defined functional scope of work. Now, again, if you want to do waterfall, you could define just one wave and multiple sprints, or one wave and one sprint, and then go ahead and run your project as waterfall as well, right? Nothing stops you from that. But you need at least one wave, at least one sprint for work items and work packages to work within focus build, right? Similarly, we have sprints, which are underneath the wave, right? So each wave could have one or more sprints. And again, it comprises of, again, a well-defined scope of work to be done in work items, right? A bunch of work items for a particular wave are picked up and then executed or developed or realized in this particular sprint, right? And technical design documents are created against the work items. And then typically you could do a show and tell session, a demo session at the end of the sprint, right? And unit test also is something that is done as part of the sprint as well. So by the end of the sprint, development is done, technical documentation is done, unit tests are performed, and a show and tell possibly is also done with the business users, right? So that's the sprint for you. Similarly for wave, if I just go back at the end of the wave, we expect that development is done for all sprints. Functional specifications are all ready before the start of the wave. You could run a wave exit criteria where you could do a planning meeting and then say the wave is done. You could run a functional integration testing that could be done for the functional scope that you have, and possibly a round of UAT as well. Now let's just look at, before we go into the full build mode, let's just look at project management a little bit, because that's something that ties together everything, and these waves and sprints are actually defined within the project management, right? If you see the green parts in here, these are all the things that you can do in focus build with respect to project management, right? So you can define a scope, you can define a timeline, you can define documentation for this particular project, you can do task management, which means that you can define milestones and tasks as well for everything that is happening within the project. You can do resource management and risk and issue management, right? All of that is done with Focus Build. Yeah, issue management is actually part of standard solution manager functionality. That's why it's in blue color. But rest of the green parts are all done with Focus Build, right? So Focus Build has an abstraction layer on top of solution manager for project management. Yeah, to define the scope, to define the timeline. There is a UI5 app that is being built for easily managing the projects and creating these waves and sprints and timelines, etc. For all of that, there is a very easy UI, which I will show quickly. And then this one interacts with a lot of other areas of solution manager. For example, project management interacts with process management. There is a link between, let's say, the solution, which is holding your processes, back to the project that is there in project management. Of course, all of the change management, requirements management, work packages, work items, they all depend on project management because they all look for dates within the project management. They all look for waves and sprints and the dates for waves and sprints within project management. So there's a hard link between change management or build management back to project management. Of course, test management also relies on project management for dates and milestones and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of interlinkages between what happens within each of these different areas to project management in Focus Build as well. So this animation shows the linkages. And then there's this one area, which is cost controlling, which is not part of standard solution manager and Focus Build. You could still achieve that by a custom integration from solution manager to your ERP system so that you can get the finance data from your ERP system and do project controlling, project budgeting, budget approvals, and so on and so forth. So that's not standard functionality. That's something that you can do as an additional integration into ERP. And we also have consulting solutions from SAP to help you build that integration as well. All right, and project management in Focus Build also, there are different types of projects. If you remember the solution readiness dashboard, I showed you a hierarchy where you could have a program or a master project, and then you can have sub-projects, what we call as build projects. You could have multiple of them, and then they are all under a master project, so that from a reporting perspective, we can aggregate the reporting from each of the sub-projects back into the program reporting and so on and so forth, which you can also visualize in the solution readiness dashboard, where when you start with the solution readiness dashboard for the master project, you can see all the sub-projects below, and when you click on the sub-project, you will see the status of only that sub-project, right? And to start with Focus Build, you need one master project and one build project, right? And there are multiple ways to configure this. You will learn that in the configuration guide. And most often than not, we see a master project and a build project concept being used by most of our customers, right? And each of the projects will have its own timeline. Each of the projects will have its own phases and milestones and so on and so forth. And it's like any other project plan that you would have, right? It will have a predefined project structure. If you want to use the templates that is coming with Focus Build, we have a master project template and a build project templates. It will have predefined waves and sprints so that you know how to define waves and sprints easily using these templates. And if you create a project in Focus Build using one of the templates, you will already see certain structures, work grid structures, which are predefined and then which you can adjust further, right, after you've reused the template. Then we have this app, which is the Fury app or a UI5 app that is available for you to easily manage these projects. Just to let you know, behind the scenes from a technology standpoint, all of this is using the PPM functionality of Solution Manager, Project and Portfolio Management functionality, which is specifically C projects as a capability is being used here. But what we've done in Focus Build is to create an abstraction layer on top, created this app, which allows you to easily manage these projects instead of you going back to the C projects UI, which is rather complex. We've created a simplified UI on top of PPM or C projects, and then that's what you can use easily in Focus Build, right? In the earlier versions of Focus Build, you had to go to C projects and create the build projects and master projects and so on and so forth. What we have done in the recent support packages is that we've created this app, which makes it much more easy for you to actually create the projects. Let's just have a quick look at project planning. Hopefully my demo system cooperates with me. Let's see, I go back to the project manager and then click this app, which is called Project Management and Focus Build Projects. And as you can see in this demo system, there are already 50 projects on my name. I hope that opens up now. I just close all the other windows. All right, so this is the project management app, as I was mentioning, which shows all the apps that I have. And let me just open one of the existing projects here. Focus Build, maybe this one here. And then this will open up the Focus Build app. I think someone was asking about a Gantt chart view, and this is the kind of Gantt chart view that we have. As you can see here, this opens up the work breakdown structure for this sample Focus Build project. And this has been created as a build project, as you can see from the names here, and that has a predefined template. And you already see that we are adopting the activate phases: discover and prepare, explore, realize, deploy, and so on and so forth. And much of what happens in Focus Build is in the realize phase. And as you can see here, 4 waves have been defined in this particular demo project. And then this is the wave 1. Underneath wave 1, these are the milestones, and no sprints have been defined in this demo. That's why we don't see sprints, but this is the work breakdown structure. And then you can adjust the dates. You can jump to the corresponding solution by linking the solution documentation here. You can also see some high-level statistics here in terms of wave relationships, what's happening, and so on and so forth. You can also go to the advanced view, which is the C projects view, directly by clicking on this link here, which will then jump to the more advanced C projects view. As I was telling you before, technically we are using C projects project management behind, and that opens up the C projects view from this abstraction view here. What I will do now is I'll just go back to the main view and then create a new project. And then I'll give FB workshop demo, and then give it a name, FB workshop demo project. And then what type of project is it, right? Is it a master project? Is it a build project, etc.? So I want to create a master project, and then it automatically picks up the template that is available for the master project. I think I will pick the latest template, which is coming with SP5 because my system is FP5. And my project, let's say I started on 1st of April and then goes on until, let's say, a few months, end of September. And then this is a demo project. And that's all you have to do. And when I click on create, what's happening behind the scenes is that it's creating a project with the template that we have picked, which is the master project template. And behind the scenes, it also creates a C projects entity within the PPM functionality of Solution Manager, which you don't directly see here unless you go to the advanced view. There's a project. Let me just see if I can find my project. Let me just sort by. This is the project that I just created. So I go inside, and when I go in the new project, as you can see, because of the template, I already have a work breakdown structure with the various phases, and some 4 waves have been created, and so on and so forth, right? So what I can do now is go into the edit mode, and then I can create some, edit the dates. Let's say I want to decide that no, it's not starting on 1st, it started on 15th, for example. You can change that, and then it tries to apply the dates to the rest of the project and so on and so forth as well, right? What you can also do is, let's say you click on a wave, you can then create sprints within the wave, create new wave or sprint, and then you can say, I want to create a new sprint here. Let me just go in here and then say, how do I create sprints? So we create a new wave. So again, This wave will be responsible maybe by the architect, and then you can give a start date of the wave. The wave starts, let's say, in the beginning of June, and it's for 2 months, and then goes until end of July, and then I can create a wave. Again, what we have done is we are basically abstracted everything. So instead of working with the C Projects UI, this app is actually allowing you to create stuff on the fly using this Fiori application or UI5 application, actually. So that's focus build project management. And of course, whenever you have a build project, you can actually start running the reporting for that using the solution readiness dashboard. Our particular project that we just created still doesn't show up in the readiness dashboard because there is a job that needs to run, which collects information and then brings it here. But what I wanted to show here in the readiness dashboard is the program versus sub-project, right? So the larger program project is always a master project, which is in this case called logistics innovation. And then they have a whole bunch of build projects, for example, for freight management, master data, and so on and so forth. So if I go into the freight management, then I'm seeing the status of the build project, which is then showing only those work packages, work items, etc., in the build project, right? One thing quickly to observe is that if you see the freight management sub view or the subset view, you see that there are 36 work packages, for example, but the number of requirements almost remains the same, right? Because the requirements backlog doesn't change whether you are in master project or in the build project. The backlog is the same. Any of these projects can be picking up this backlog and realizing these requirements. So requirements are kind of over and above the projects. They are a permanent backlog that is available for you, which you can then realize in any number of projects. The requirements numbers remain the same. The in-progress ones will change because of the project, but the work package numbers change based on which projects and sub-projects that you are in, right? So that's also important to understand. All right, so that's on project management. Quickly, let me just see the whole bunch of messages, look at some of the questions. Wow, lots of questions, lots of questions. Unfortunately, Rob, I don't have the unanswered questions from previous. I did save the chat, so I will try and see if I didn't answer them. I will pick them up when I send the notes. Can we use focus build for 3 system landscape, dev, QA, prod? You need to have a dummy system in between, and then you could have focus build used for a 3 system landscape as well. A virtual system, actually, that's what it's called in Charm. The process structure that we have now in ECC can help us when we move to S/4HANA, and does that bombs are needed? The process diagrams are must. The process diagrams are not must for a focus build. Yes, definitely the ECC process structures are relevant for your S/4HANA project. So what happens is that if you have already using Solution Manager for ECC, then you would have process structures in the production branch. And when you created a new development branch, design branch, import branch, everything that was previously there from ECC in your production branch are already there in your project. You can now modify them as part of your project. You can redesign them as per S/4HANA and so on and so forth. So that's definitely an ideal way to use when you're doing a conversion project, for example, where you're converting the ECC system to S/4HANA. Helen. Are you going to give us links to the courses on OpenSAP? Yes, I will definitely provide that link. Where do you start from SolDoc or one of the Fiori tiles? For requirements, if the question is related to requirements, Rob, the starting point is SolDoc. That's the ideal one. You could also create requirements from one of the tiles, which is typically used for non-functional requirements, right? Our recommended way is to always start from SolDoc, because then you will have the linkage back to solution documentation, which is essential for traceability, right? We are implementing fixed base for S/4HANA Go Live. Do we create a requirement for those fixes, or is it only for innovation projects? So requirements are only for innovation projects, Nina. How do we centrally manage or view all project resources from multiple build projects? So resources are then aggregated in the master project. So you could see all the resources in the master project if you have build projects which are rolled up into the master project, right? I think that was also the next question. Can we import MPP? Yes, there is a one-time import of an MPP into C projects. That's possible, but there is no synchronization between these two. Can we export the information into Excel from the project plan? Yes, from the C projects, you can download into an Excel. Although we don't encourage that because we believe everything can be done with the solution in this dashboard and the apps that we have. But of course, there is a technical functionality to export it into an Excel as well. And creating a project, can you backdate the start date? Like what I did start with April 1st. Yes, you could do a earlier start date as well. Although for the build phase, it gets a little bit tricky. If your waves are ending in the past, etc., then it gets very tricky to manage those work packages and all. So as long as you're still in the prepare phases, etc., it is still possible. Yes, the project management component is free in Focus Build. With that question, let me continue because we have a lot of room to cover still. Now we get into build management. We have a bunch of projects, let's say a master project and a couple of build projects, define some waves and sprints, and now we can start to realize the requirements. I would like to go back to this picture, the complex picture that we saw on day one, where we were talking about how Activate talks about this fit gap analysis and delta design. And for work packages and work items, once you have a requirements backlog, the delta design part is where you will create the work packages and work items. So you look at a bunch of requirements and then you see, okay, how do I want to realize these? Are these requirements too big? Then maybe I need multiple work packages. Are these rather small? Then maybe I can put multiple requirements into one work package and so on and so forth, right? So you just first prioritize your backlog and then start to realize them using multiple work packages, and then start to assign them to waves and sprints and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's the activity that you will have to do in the delta design part of Activate. Right? So what are some of the guidelines for creating these work packages? Essentially, you take requirements and then you organize them to say, okay, how do I want to deliver them? Either bundle them into organizational structures or business processes, like I want to do all the procure to pay ones, I want to do all the logistics ones together, etc. So that's the strategy that you will have to figure out as a project, and then look at the backlog and then start to create the work packages, right? And the link from work package to process structure is automatic, which means that they inherit the linkage that is coming from requirements. So if a requirement is assigned to a process structure like create purchase order, for example, that linkage automatically is inherited into the work package that is created to realize this requirement. Right? If work package is created from a requirement, it will inherit the process structure from the requirement. It also inherits the categorization, classification, and so on and so forth. So a lot of information actually flows from requirement into work package as well, right? Then we also have work package tile and how to manage work packages. I will show that in the demo as well for you to track your own work packages and so on and so forth. But the creation of the work packages typically happens from the requirements management app, where you search for requirements based on various criteria, pick a bunch of requirements, one or more of them, and then start to create work packages. That's the starting point to create work packages. Yeah? And I will show that in the demo as well. And typically work package, we expect that at least one functional specification is assigned to the work package. Now, this is important because this is something that we also track as a deliverable within the project, and it is also tracked in the solution readiness dashboard where we show whether functional specifications are available, are they overdue, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of reporting that happens against these functional specifications. So Focus Build expects that each work package has a functional specification that needs to be created. And then eventually work packages will then be subdivided into work items, which is where the actual work happens on the system with transport requests by the developers or architects. Of course, we also can do waterfall versus scaled agile type of delivery, which means that if you want to do waterfall, typically customers go with this kind of an approach as an example, where wave one is customizing related basic changes all done in wave one, then gaps or developments are done in wave two, write-ups are done in wave three, and whatever integrations and integrations into third party, etc., are also done in wave four, right? So that's one example of how customers define waves, right? So even if you're following waterfall, you could still divide waves, which is essentially scoping of work to be done in multiple chunks, right? Within the build phase. So you could still do that. If you're doing an agile approach, then you prioritize your backlog, pick up whatever is there, and create specifications, extend the specification in wave two, and then use an agile approach to actually create your waves and sprints and so on and so forth as well, right? So these are multiple ways that you can do. Now let's look at the different statuses. I think we looked at the statuses of the requirements, like once the requirement is created, it's in draft. Once it is approved, then only you can create a work package. I mentioned that yesterday. So once a requirement is approved, you can create a work package. And as soon as the work package is created, it's in created state, and then you need to set it into scoping, right? Now, once you set the work package in scoping, that's when you can create work items underneath it. Right? Once all work items have been created, you can change the status into scope finalized. And once the work package is in scope finalized, you can't create any more work items. And then once work items are created, then it automatically goes into development, because each work item will go into development. And as soon as the work item is in development, the work package is automatically set into in development status as well. You see this dotted line, which means that this status is automatically set, right? It's not set by the individual. Until this point of time, it is set by the user. But once you are in development, then the work package status is set into development automatically by the system based on the status of the work item. Similarly, once you are in scoping with the work package, the requirement automatically goes into realization, which means that somebody started to scope this work package, which means that work has already started. That's why this requirement goes into in realization state, right? So this realization status, in realization status, is not set by the user, but by the system. Yeah. Similarly, once the development is happening, unit test is successfully completed, then again, work package is set to be tested automatically, right? And then you can run your functional integration testing, user acceptance testing, any kind of testing on top of these work packages, and finally change the status to successfully tested. Again, you see it's a dark arrow, which means that from to be tested to successfully tested, it is set by the user. And then once the testing is completed, it is set to hand over to release. And that's almost the final status from a development standpoint, where we are saying that we have looked at this work package, we have developed it, we have tested it even from integration and user acceptance perspective, and now we are ready for release, right? And once the work packages are set to hand over to release, then the requirements are automatically set to realized status, right? And then once the all the work packages are bundled together into a release and deployed into production, then the work packages are set automatically to productive, and the requirements are set to completed, right? As you can see, there is a lot of interlinkages between various statuses, some of them manually set by users, some of them set by the system based on the status of some other entity within Focus Build. And that's the reason why Focus Build is tightly configured to work together, and we don't allow changes to these workflows by you in the customer scenario, right? Because if one breaks, everything else will break as well, right? So this is a very tight-knit workflow. Another thing to observe here is the branch architecture on top, right? While you are in these statuses of the work package and requirements, you are still in the design branch. Once you get to be developed and in development, in testing, etc., you're working in the development branch of the solution. And once, of course, you are gone live, all the changes are deployed in production, then you go to the production branch, right? You see the linkages where the users are based on the status of the requirements, work packages, and work items. And now we see this again, the same set of statuses, but from a system perspective. This is a 4-system landscape that Focus Build supports, from dev, quality, pre-prod, and production, and also a sandbox if you want to have a sandbox. So earlier stages of the requirements, we work in the sandbox environment. Once the development starts, we start in the development environment. Once we go into testing, we go into the QAS environment. Once we are doing release level testing, we go into the pre-production environment. And of course, once we deploy the changes, we go to the production system, right? So this is the system mapping to the same entities, which are requirements, work package, and work items. Now, the result of it is that we have requirements, which we created from the solution documentation, and they are first created in draft, then either postponed or approved. Once they are approved, then a work package is created, and the work package is in the created status. And it could be rejected after it has been created, but it could go into scoping. If it is going into scoping, then we assign it to a wave and say that, okay, we will deliver in this particular wave within our project. And then you start to create functional specifications. Those specifications will go reside in your solution documentation. And then then you could also create test cases, and those would be created and stored in the solution documentation as well, right? Um, we also have various types of documents, right? So we have a specification, we are talking about functional test cases, we are also talking about technical designs and use case documents, et cetera, et cetera. And when you are working in these entities, when you are in a requirements app or when you are in the work package app and you're creating some of these documents, automatically based on the type of the document, if it's a functional specification, it goes and sits in the appropriate space. If it's a test case, it goes and sits at the appropriate space. If it's a technical design, it goes and sits at the development library. If it's a use case diagram, then it goes and sits in the business process. All of this is also automatically done by Focus Build. So it knows based on the type of the document that you're uploading, where to go and store it. Yeah, so it's also important that you use the standard types of documents. Of course, you can change the template of these documents. You could have your own company logo and structures and table of contents and so on and so forth. But the document type is very important because that's what is used by Focus Build to go and then. And also these types are important from reporting perspective because when you look at the solution readiness dashboard, you have a tile which says function specifications are overdue, right? So we need to know what is the document which is of the type functional specification, right? So that's why these document types are quite important for you to note. And then important thing also to note is that because we have these branches that are involved, like design branch, development branch, and production branch are the most important ones, because import branch is not really used actively, right? And then whenever there is changes in the status of the work package and work items, etc., documents are also moving from the lower branch to the upper branch, right? When you release this solution documentation elements from the design to development branch, automatically, this is done automatically when the work packages are handed over to development. So when you change the work package status from scoping to in development, then there is a signal that is sent essentially in the system to say that, hey, now we are getting into development phase. So which means that all the documents should move from the design phase for that work package, whatever is only relevant for that work package, that specification, that document, that structural element goes up into the development branch. So that when the developers start working on the work items, they are working against the development branch, right? Finally, when the work packages are released into production, they're ready for release, they're completed, then all these documents are also automatically going into production. So the movement of structures and documents from one branch to another is not done manually, but based on the status of the work packages and work items, right? This is also important, right? So we are tightly linking together the documentation, which is the process structures, diagrams, and these physical documents to the change entities, which are essentially work packages, work items, etc., so that the movement from one branch to another and eventually into production is also controlled by work packages and work items. All right. So underneath these work items, we also have transport management, right? So we also need to understand that while we have the dev system, quality system, pre-production, and production system, all the transports which are created underneath these work items are also automatically managed by solution managers using Charm, right? Which means that as soon as transports are created, when you want to do unit testing and you want to go to the QAS system, first we do a transport of copies. So that is sent across, and then you can do multiple rounds of testing. And once the testing is successfully tested, then the actual transport is released, and then that is then sent into the QAS system for UAT and functional integration testing. And then once the functional integration testing is completed, when the work package is in handover to release, then based on the release import, all the transports are moving into pre-production system. So individual transports are moving from dev to QAS, either as transport of copies or the actual transports, but bundled or packaged or released transports are moving from QAS system to pre-prod and also from pre-prod to production, right? So from QAS to pre-prod, individual transports are not moving, but a package is moving, which is based on the release. Similarly, from pre-prod to production, the same release is then going from pre-prod to production. But from dev to QAs, the individual transports or transport of copies are moving. That's important to understand in focus build. Otherwise, we use charm. We also have jobs, which you can schedule in terms of when you want the movement to happen based on the status of work packages and work items. Again, the status of the work packages and work items define where the transport is moving or when the transport is moving. Yeah. So these jobs are constantly looking at the status of these work items, etc. So if the work item is now ready to be tested, then it knows that it has to move into the test environment or the test client, and that's what is done by the job, right? So the status of these work items, work packages is extremely, extremely important. All right. So how does this work? Let's say you are in the work package. When the work package is in development, tasks are released, and transport of copies is then, once it's successfully tested, it moves into the QAS system and goes into, when it is handed over to release, then it goes into the pre-production environment, and then once the release testing is finished, then it goes into the production system. Right. So these last two, going into pre-production and production, happens via release. The remaining ones are happening as individual transports per work package, right? And the right items is transport of copies. So the first transport of copies is released, then testing is done in QAS, another copy is released based on the fixes so that we can reduce the number of transport requests, right? So that's why we use the transport of copies concept. Similarly, within work items, as soon as the work item is in created status, transport is created, and then it is transport of copies is going to the QAS system. Once it is successfully tested, the actual transport is released and then imported into the QAS system. And then once the release starts to pick up, when it is handed over to release, then it goes from pre-production. And then once the release testing is finished, it goes into production as well. Very similar, but in a more granular way, it happens at the work item level, right? Again, just to reiterate, the status of the work package defines where the transport is and what kind of movement happens, whether it is transport of copies or the actual transport. Yeah. All right. Let's just quickly go into the demo of work packages and work items. Let me pick up some questions before I jump into some demo. Let's see. Can you share the presentation? Yes, we will share the presentation to everyone. Then when focus build is activated and the branch has change control active, can one still move the documentation from import to design branch with the release function? Yes, from import to design branch, it is with the release function, Rob. Must it happen from the action from within focus build? No, doesn't happen from within focus build. It happens from solution documentation. The movement of documentation or structures from import to design branch happens from the solution documentation view and not automatically triggered by focus build, right? Then how are late changes to documents tracked and managed? Not sure what you mean by late changes, Morne. If you mean by changes which were already started before you implemented focus build, etc., then we need to look at them. How are they, if the tasks are released or not, the transports are released or not. To dev, a change is identified. After moving to dev, changes. So any change that you need to do in solution documentation, if that's what you're asking, then that has to have a change documented, a work package or a work item. If you create a new work package in the design branch, then you can start to modify anything in the design branch, right? If you if there is a work package which is open, then you can modify those structures in the development branch, for example. I'm not sure if you're talking about documentation or transports. Maybe you can ask the question later after the demo by unmuting yourself, Morning. So I'll jump to the demo in the meanwhile. All right, let me see if my demo system is helpful still. All right, so I go back as an architect. And then I want to look at my requirements management app. Now, this app is what I would use to search for my requirements and see what are there. So I want to see all the requirements which are approved, because unless they are approved, I can't create work packages. I want to look at the very high ones, let's say, and maybe created by myself, which is Agata, right? And that shouldn't be many. It's just one right now, which is approved. right? Maybe I look at the ones which are to be approved and then see how many of them are there. None of them. Excuse me. Let me look at some of the draft ones. I created a bunch of them for the workshop, like this one here. I want to now go in and then maybe quickly approve this so that send for approval, and then immediately approve this. Right now I have my requirement in approved status. So I go back and search for the ones which are coming up. Now for this requirement, as you can see, there is nothing under the work package column, which means that no work package has been created. Now I want to realize this with the work package. So I go to the work package section now and say I want to create a work package. Now this form comes up, and as you can see, some information is already inherited, like the title is coming in, right? So it's not a requirement anymore. This is a work package. Say this is work package 1, and you can have a priority for this work package. Then if the requirement had a category, then that category is inherited here. In this case, my requirement did not have a category, but I would like to give a category to my work package that it is related to, let's say, ERP, FI, and then it's a fit work package. So that itself creates some information. Now I want to assign it to a wave, right? This is important. So I search for a project, let's say the freight management project, and then select a particular wave, right? It shows only wave 2 and wave 3 because wave 1 is already completed based on the dates that are there in the freight management, right? So I select wave 2, which is still open, and then I create a work package. As you can see right now, project and wave are optional, although I have still selected them. You could also do that later point of time if you just want to create work packages now and then decide on when you want to deliver them, in which project and which wave, etc. You could do that later as well. But in this case, I'm just creating it right away. So now I have an approved requirement, which is already created with the work item. Now, let me go back to that work package which we just created by going back to my home screen. And now I'm an architect, so I have access to all of these. I can go to my work packages. And then I will be able to find all the work packages that are there. And as you can see, my newly created work packages here, which is inherited the value point and effort point. The category has been set, freight management with wave 2. And freight management has been assigned with the release, which we have not seen, unfortunately, in the project management demo. So each project is assigned with the release. And because freight management was selected for this work package, the release for my project or for this work package is picked up from the freight management project with the go live date of August 1st, 2020. Right? So this is the release date for my work package as well. Right? So if anyone wants to know when this work package will go live, they will know because I have inherited based on the project, the release go live date as well, right? So now I have some work package owner, project manager, which is inherited from the project that I've assigned. And I go into the edit mode and then I say, you know what, maybe wave 2 is too much. It's too early. Maybe I go for wave 3, right? And then I save the information. Then I go back into the edit mode and then say what else I have here in the work package. I can look at the dates. Now, because I've selected wave 3, I have time of entry, which is today, but function specification should be released by September 1st, because for wave 3, that was the milestone that was set in the project plan, right? So this date is inherited from the wave. So if you change the wave, the date of when the function specification is to be released is mentioned here. Now, why is this date important? Because using this date, we can then track whether function specifications have been created in time or not. Right? So now if it is past September 1st, then I know that this work package is overdue because there is no function specification created, right? Unfortunately, in this wave definition, there is no build finish date and test completion date milestones defined. That's why these dates are empty, right? Then I can also have some text. You can add more text and then say, you know, converse between architects and project manager, etc. You can have some attachments if you want to create something. What's more important is this documentation tab, Now, if I go into this documentation tab, I see that accounts payable process structure is already here. Now, how did I get this? Because I created this work package from a requirement which was originally assigned to this accounts payable process, right? Because I use the accounts payable process, that process has been inherited into the work package, right? And under that process, I see that there are some process diagrams, etc., but there are no functional specifications. Now I can create specifications here and so on and so forth for this particular work package. But right now my work package is still in creation stage, right? It has now move forward. So what I'll do is I want to now define scope, right? I'm progressing it from one status to another. Now I'm in scoping status. I'm here in the documentation, and then I can go to the scope tab. No work items have been created. So what I can do is I can now create a work item of the type normal change, then give it a title, work item for FP workshop, and then I can select the sprint. Now, because my work package was selected in wave 3, I have 4 sprints, a testing sprint, sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, and I want to select sprint 2 for this particular work item. And then the system, productive system where this work item eventually will go to has already been pre-selected because this is based on the setup of Charm. And then I want to classify this work item as a fit work item. I can already assign the development team or a developer here and so on and so forth. If I create more and more developers, then tasks will be created automatically. Otherwise, only a transport request is created. I can also say that, you know what, when my developers come into this work item, I want them to look at this particular process and all the specifications that I'm writing over there. They should be able to see it. So I would like this particular process to move into my work item as well. You can selectively change because you could have multiple work items and maybe one process needs to documentation goes to one work item, another documentation goes to another work item. So we can choose here. In this case, we only have one process. So now I have created a work item, and then I'm still in scoping, so I can still create work items here. I can create maybe another one just to show that I can go in maybe already in sprint 2, and this is classified as non-functional. Maybe some stuff needs to be done, and then here I don't send any information, and then save. So now I have 2 work items, one both in sprint 2, right, going in. And for this one, I didn't create a title, but it's okay. And then now I say that my work, I will approve the scope. This seems to be good. I will approve the scope. It does some checks and then says, yes, scope is finalized. And now I have my work items created as well, right? So this is what you do. And I went through whatever happens in a couple of days in a minute, because this happens maybe with multiple people over a period of time. Specifications are created separately and so on and so forth, right? And interestingly, you could also check a status here for documentation. Because it's a fit, I expect a configuration guide. I also expect a test case, and currently they are not available, right? And they're not red because the wave has not yet started. It is in September, so we don't need to worry about the status yet, right? But once we are getting closer to that wave, then the status changes to red because we expect a configuration guide. Because this work package is of the type fit, we expect a configuration guide over there, right? And then finally, I can say now I hand over to development. And developers can now start working on the work items, right? So if I just go back to my home, I go to my work items, and then I should see the ones that I just created from the work package. You see this work package 1, this was created for sprint 2. Again, the release is inherited, the category is inherited. And if I go to the documentation in this one, process structure should come in. Maybe this one, I think I've included the documentation. Yes, so this one, accounts payable documentation also comes in, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the developer view, where the developer is then seeing the work item, and then they can actually go to the transport tab. They can start to create transport requests here. Once it is still in created status, you can't create the transport requests yet, but you can create tasks from here. You can directly log into the development system from here, and so on and so forth. right? Again, the dates are inherited here, uh, when the development should start, when the technical design should be available, and so on and so forth. They are inherited from the sprint documentation, right? The dates for work package are coming from the wave documentation. The dates for work items are coming from some issue here on the system, but the dates are inherited for the work items from the sprint. Yeah. Let's see what else I wanted to show. Work item creation has been done, and tracking in solution readiness dashboard, of course. So we have seen that already. If I go to the readiness dashboard again, I can see the work packages and work item tiles, and this is where I track the work packages and work items, right? Again, in the freight management, I will still not see the newly created work packages that we just created because the job has not been run. You cannot see this because of my timestamp here, but there is a job execution time here at the below at the bottom of the dashboard that shows when the last job was run, right? But otherwise, tracking of the work packages can be done from the dashboard here. You can see the work packages here under ERP categorization. There is one work package here. Again, you can then see which wave it is and who is it assigned to, and so on and so forth. You can also jump directly into that work package, like how we jumped into the requirement. You can also jump into the work package and take some actions here. This one is still to be developed. So you can extend the scope or change scope and do scope changes to the work package and so on and so forth, right? Again, similar to requirements, you start at a high level overview, jump into the details and directly go into the transaction or that entity and then make modifications from a project report standpoint. Somebody was asking about the task tracking. This could be done in this readiness dashboard as well. While we are here, you can also see the task completion here. If you go into the task in the schedule one, in this, you can then see all the tasks that are to be done and what is the status, what is the completion, and so on and so forth. You can see it here in this view. This is all the tasks that are there in my project, in this project called Logistic Innovation, right? If I go into the freight management for that, you will see a better view because underneath the freight management, you will see tasks defined as well. So wave one, sprint one is completed and so on and so forth. You see, that's why we are not able to select wave one in the freight management when we wanted to select for our work packages because that's already completed based on the dates in 2019 here, right? Another view that you also have is the wave progress. So if you go in here, you can then see the wave progress in a kind of a burn down chart view. You can then see progress for the current wave based on where we are, what's happening with the different tasks that are there within that particular wave, how many work packages are completed, and so on and so forth, right? You can see the wave progress here, right? You could also see it for this particular wave, for example, what is the functional specification completeness, how many of them are overdue, etc. For wave two and wave one, you can switch between waves and then look at the wave progress for a given wave as well, right? So this is also kind of tracking for at a task level for a given wave and so on and so forth. All right. Okay, I think we have about 45 minutes left, which is good to jump into test management, but let's just look at the questions. There was a conflict reported. What are the differences between focus build and charm? Let me just go from the top. What are the differences between focus build and charm? Charm is an integral part of focus build. Charm is leveraged in focus build. For example, work package that you see in focus build is nothing but a charm entity. In the traditional charm, you would use it like a request for change. If you know charm and you have a request for change, RFC, equivalent of that is a work package in focus build. And work item, if you would have noticed in the demo, is nothing but a change document like normal change or urgent change, right? So work item is nothing but a change document, and work package is nothing but request for change. It's similar to request for change, right? I wouldn't say it's the same. It's been created using those charm transaction types to go technical, yeah? And from a transport management perspective and how you set up the transport routes and enabling charm, etc., has to be done for focus build as well, right? As part of the focus build setup, you would set up charm from a technical perspective, not from a functional perspective in the sense of creating those transaction types and workflows, etc. All those CRM activities you would not do, But the technical activities of setting up the system landscape and the transport routes, etc., you still need to do for focus build. So in short, focus build leverages charm, and charm is needed for focus build, right? There was a conflict reported, Rob. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's just see this. On the demo. Maybe I'll just go back and then see what's over there. How do you manage task relationships? There is, okay, let me just go back to the demo because there are two questions, one from Rob and one from Madeline, which are related to that. Let me just go back to one of the work packages, maybe this one here. To show the relationship. So we manage relationships between focus build entities in these relations tab, right? You can add related work packages. So one package is dependent on the other and so on and so forth. So if you see already this, there are certain relationships which are already there. Obviously, it is related to the requirement from which this work package is created. It is also related to the work item, which is the follow up activity that is then created as well. So these relations are created automatically, but you could add other work packages to it. Now, why am I showing this? Because each of these entities, whether it's a work package or a work item, could be created as a task within the project plan. And the relationship between those tasks are derived from the relationship from these entities, right? So from focus build perspective, we don't want you to worry about the actual tasks within the project plan itself. We want you to worry about the relationships and the status of the work packages and work items. This is far better way of managing it rather than individual tasks. So in other words, we will not create explicit individual tasks within the work breakdown structure within focus build. We will only create entities like these, like work packages and work items, and these will be automatically be created as tasks within the project plan and then could be tracked. So the relationships that you set here will become the relationships within the tasks within the project plan as well. I hope that answers your question. You could also create relationships within C projects as well. So you could actually go to C projects, take the task and have predecessor and successor tasks and so on and so forth. We don't expect that you need to do that if you're using focus build because we have that handled through the entities here, right? But of course, you can always go to the advanced view of C projects and create your own tasks, create the relationships between those tasks as well, right? If you want to do that. Hope that answers your question, Madeline. Some exceptions were shown here. Let me just see the current status of this work package, why it was showing the conflict here. So this is actually not conflict per se. This is the overall rating saying that something they did not understand essentially, right? Somehow this is not opening properly here. Maybe I go back to my example, which we just created. Yeah, so configuration guide, because it's already being developed and development has started on this because we created work items and started the development, right? Documents are not yet available, and that's why the rating has gone red, right? I hope that answers your question, Rob. All right, let's see, one last chat window. With a new requirement, how do we do change impact assessment? With the new requirement, we don't have a change impact assessment from a requirement standpoint. We only know that which business processes this requirement belongs to. I'm not sure what kind of impact and assessment you're expecting here, Suzar, but we don't have any functionality that does impact assessment per se. What we do have is technical impact assessment that happens once the requirement is realized, which means that you create a work package and work item, and then you create transport requests. At that stage, you could use tools like business process change analyzer, which will then tell you if you make these changes in these transport requests for this requirement, which other business processes are impacted. That you could do with Business Process Change Analyzer, but that's a completely different functionality. You could use that, but not at an early stage when you have just created a requirement, right? All you will know is that this requirement was created for a particular business process, but there is no other impact assessment that is done, at least from the tool perspective. Yeah. But once the requirement is realized or started to realize, or once the developer starts to work on that particular requirement, then we can do an impact analysis of those changes that you have done to realize this requirement back to other processes and so on and so forth. That is possible with Business Process Change Analyzer. All right, that was that. And then we move into test management, which is another big area within Focus Build and Solution Manager. Now for testing, which for various kinds of testing, especially functional testing, which then happens at work package level or at release level, etc., we have various capabilities that we leverage. We do have Test Suite, which is available in Solution Manager standard itself, as many of you might know, where you can create manual test cases, automated test cases. We have a test automation framework. I was just mentioning the change impact analysis tool, which is the business process change analyzer tool that could be used for identifying the impact of a technical change. We have test plan management, test package management, etc., etc. All of that is part of Solution Manager standard, which is of course leveraged in Focus Build as well. But over and above, what we have as additional functionalities in Focus Build is a new type of test, which is called as a test steps type of test, which we will see as well. This is an easier way to create test cases. Instead of creating Word documents or Excel spreadsheets, you can create them as individual test steps within the tool. There is a designer for that is available in Focus Build. Then we also have certain apps, like for the end user tester, for the tester, we have a UI5 app, a Fiori app, which is easily, which the testers can use to actually find their test cases and execute them and pass or fail them and create defects. For that, we've created a very easy Fiori app. So especially keeping the UAT testers in mind. Of course, that could be used by all testers. Then in Focus Build, we also have additional test dashboard with the traceability metrics, which is possible in Focus Build because as you can imagine, we now have a relationship from business process to requirement to work package to work item to test case. We are able to draw full traceability in terms of identifying whether a particular requirement has been tested or not, whether a particular requirement has a test case which is passed or failed, or whether defects are available, etc. So you can draw traceability as well, which is available in the Focus Build test dashboard. And finally, we also have a smart way of identifying the test scope for a given wave, for example, which is quite interesting as well, because we know what is being developed in the wave, what work packages are there, what business processes these work packages are related to. We can make a proposal in terms of what should be tested for a given wave. Right? So we can also do an automated test plan generation from the wave as well, using this functionality, which is also a rather smart way or an automated way of test planning, which we will see quickly. Right? These are all additional functionalities which are over and above in Focus Build. Of course, we will leverage many of the standard functionalities as well as part of the project testing. When we just go back to waterfall approach, if you want to follow waterfall with just one wave for the whole project, you could also do that. You could do acceptance testing and integration testing at the end of the wave in a typical waterfall mode, where you could just sample it with one wave on one sprint. Or you could do multiple waves and then create multiple cycles of testing with multiple integrations, multiple acceptance testing cycles, and so on and so forth as well. This is a typical V model that many of you might know. So requirements are created into work packages, and work packages are divided into work items for technical design. And against these work items, you do unit testing. And typically, we don't expect that unit testing is done in a planned way, in the sense that you create a test plan and package and assign them to testers and so on and so forth, because developers are doing their own testing. Most often than not, these unit tests are automated as well. So unit tests are done directly within the work item as a status change, which means that once the work item is done with development, you change the status to be tested, then unit test is performed, and then the work item is then changed to a status called tested successfully. And at that stage, we take the signal that unit test has been completed for that work item. right? Of course, you can also run a test plan and a package, etc., but we don't see that happening in all the projects, right? But the more structured testing with planned testing that happens is either at a single functional test or integration test or regression test or acceptance test. All of these different kinds of tests are all done as a structured, planned test cycles, and that could be done using Focus Build and Solution Manager, using the test suite functionality. Again, a topology view of how the different work packages, work item statuses fit to different kinds of testing. And I was just mentioning that as at the developer level, we start with unit testing when the developer moves the work item from in development to be tested, and from to be tested to successfully tested. At this stage, we are doing unit testing. Once the work item is successfully unit tested, then the work package is automatically set to be tested. And that's where you would do your functional testing, user acceptance testing in the QAS environment. And then once the work package is gone to hand it over to release together with the work items, at that stage, you would do another round of final integration testing, final regression testing, and final release testing before it goes into production, right? From a branch perspective, there's no testing that happens in the design branch. All testing happens in the development branch, including the release testing. And finally, in production, again, no testing happens. From a system perspective, unit testing happens in the dev unit test client or the QAS client, depending upon how you set up the charm. QAS testing mainly is the functional testing, where you could do your integration testing, acceptance testing, and so on and so forth. And the release level testing happens in the pre-production environment. And we do have customers who create multiple QAS environments, parallel QAS environments, which are then used for different kinds of testing. Especially with some production like data loads happening in a parallel QAS environment, etc. In those cases, transport routes have to be configured accordingly. The system will push to 2 systems at a time, right? So that's a workaround that is then possible if you want to have parallel test environments, right? But this sequence is standard, where from dev to QAS to pre-prod to prod. But if you want to have a parallel testing environment for data migration testing, etc., you could have another system where transports are pushed from dev to both these systems at the same time. There are multiple variants of how you want to do testing, especially functional testing, integration testing, and acceptance testing. The first variant is you don't have any test plan or any documentation, you just do it offline, essentially, and that's of course not recommended. But what we have possibilities are either you could create formal documentation, but no test plan, which means that you are testing it outside of the test suite, which means that there is no test plan or a package, there are no testers coming in and testing, etc. But it's done in an offline mode, right? What you call as variant A2. The third variant is a more formal testing, where you create test plans, you assign them to testers, and so on and so forth. You have a much more structured way of running the test plan. That's the more formal way of running it, right? Of course, we recommend A3 and also at least A2, right? Definitely not variant A1, right? And what is also important is that test cases have to be assigned to work packages, right? Now, this creates that traceability link that is needed, because so far we have relationship between process to requirement to work package. Now, test cases have to be assigned to work packages as well, so that we now know when this test case is tested, we know whether a particular requirement is tested or not. For the requirements testability, this dotted line that you see here is extremely important, which is assigning the test cases to work packages. Yeah. So how does the workflow work in these cases, especially for variant A3, which is the most comprehensive way of running the test? You assign test cases to process steps or processes, right? And then assign the test cases to work packages, right? This in the planning stage, we have tools to check whether work packages have test cases or not, which are the work packages which do not have test cases, so that you can find out why there are no test cases created for these work packages and then track them and so on and so forth. Then you can create a test plan based on work packages itself. Either you can create a test plan on your own by directly selecting the business processes, Or more smarter way to do it is that you say that, hey, in this wave, I have these 100 work packages. Now create a test plan for these 100 work packages, right? And the system will know which business processes and which test cases to pick in this test plan, and then creates a test plan for you, right? That's a smarter way or a more automated way of creating a test plan for a given wave, rather than manually checking, okay, which processes should I test in this cycle, select all those processes and those test cases and create a test plan. That's also possible, but then that's a more tedious way of doing it, because we have these smart relationships between test cases and work packages to business processes to work packages. So this app that I'm going to show is going to leverage all of those relationships and generates a test plan for you, right? That saves a lot of time. And of course, once you create your test packages and testers will start to use the new Fiori app and start to do the testing, and then log the test results, create defects. And then if the defects have to be corrected with the transport request, then you create a defect correction. And then testers will retest and then finally set the test case to pass. And then while all of this is happening, you as a test manager are using the test suite dashboard to track all these activities that are happening, either from a planning and preparation standpoint or from a execution standpoint, right? So this is the tester workflow. And then we have a few apps in Focus Build, which are over and above Solution Manager Standard. Excuse me, get some water. One app is the Test Step Designer. And as I mentioned before, this is a new kind of test case that you can create using Focus Build. And instead of creating a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, you create a test case here in the Test Step Designer, where you have multiple steps. And then you would have the description, expected result. You can also assign a Fiori app executable directly here, and so on and so forth, so that it's easier for the tester to read through it and pass individual steps, fail steps, etc. What is also possible is to auto-generate these steps based on the process structure. So let's say you're creating a process test case. Then what this test step designer can do is look at all the steps which are there under the process in your solution documentation and creates these steps automatically for you. Like here in the screenshot where you have create purchase order, goods movement, incoming invoice, payment run. These steps were part of a process and they were automatically generated, so that you don't need to create these steps one by one, but based on the process structure that we have in the solution documentation, we can generate as test steps as well. So that saves a lot of time as well over there, right? And when we generate such a step, because we know in the solution documentation for create purchase order, there is a Fiori app in S/4HANA, that Fiori app executable is also coming and sitting here. So it gives easy access for your tester to directly launch that Fiori app and test this particular step, right? So it's a very smart way of creating the steps as well. And this you can do by clicking this button called Add from SolDoc. Yeah. So this is a new functionality that is available in Focus Build. Then during execution, what happens? I'll just go through this animation. A tester comes in, finds the test cases using the UI5 app or the Fiori app, executes the test cases, and then set the status value. And if something goes wrong, they will create a test defect. And then if a defect needs a correction, then the test defect correction is created. Then the developer comes into play. They will fix the defect by creating a transport request and send the defect for retest. And the tester comes in and then does the retest. And finally, as a test manager, you are doing test case reporting and then finally doing a test sign-off at the test plan level, right? So this is the execution process that happens within Test Suite and Focus Build. And many projects also need to do regression testing, especially if they are following Agile and then doing multiple waves of delivery, etc. There are a couple of options for regression testing. One scenario is you do regression testing just before deploy, which means that you have done some last minute changes in your release and then you just want to make sure that everything is working. Then they do a regression testing just before deploying into production. Another more agile way to do regression testing, or the scenario comes in where you have to do after every wave, so that you ensure that nothing has broken in the functionality that you developed in wave 1. You need to do regression testing of wave 1 in wave 2, right? So for all of these, you can leverage automated testing, which is available in Solution Manager Standard. You could also leverage a smarter way of identifying regression test scope using tools like business process change analyzer. I'm not covering that in detail. If you want, there's a lot of material available to identify and optimize test scope for your regression testing, and also automate your testing using our test automation framework. Right? So test automation framework is included in your solution manager. It also has an automation tool in the form of CBTA, or component-based test automation. All of these tools are readily available in Solution Manager Standard, which could help in your regression testing within the project as well. Right? I will not go in detail of these tools, but Business Process Change Analyzer is one such tool which allows you to have a very risk-based approach for your identifying your test scope. So that's possible with Business Process Change Analyzer. The second tool is Test Automation Framework, which allows you to design and execute automated test cases for SAP applications and non-SAP applications using a framework. We also have a tool within Solution Manager called CBTA, which allows you to run automated test cases as well. Right? I have seen very few projects where automated testing is happening within the project, but there are projects where they have done automated testing within project as well, using tools like Test Automation Framework and CBTA. Right? With that, let's get into a demo. Just quickly checking on questions on test management. I noticed the test cases in best practice are loaded at process level. Does it mean you're not promoting managing test packages at executable level? You're right. We do have test cases in best practice at process level only. Unfortunately, there are in model companies, we are investing more and more in automated test cases and test step designer type of test cases, which are more granular, Rob. But unfortunately, in the best practice, we only have test cases at the process level. Doesn't mean that we are encouraging only process level testing, but process level test cases are the most common test cases that we see even in projects as well, because creating test cases at the step level is also an effort intensive one. So we see more and more projects creating only process level test cases as well. Then the question from Madeline, does FB support the import of Activate project from Roadmap Viewer? Yes, you could use it. It's just that you need to do a mapping to that C project, because Activate projects come into C projects, and from there you need to map them and classify them as master project and build project, and then create the waves and sprints within the realize phase of the Activate project. Yes, that is possible. Although, I mean, that depends on how much you want to use Activate. The focus build templates also use Activate as a high level, at a phase level structure. But if you want full work breakdown structure that is coming from the roadmap, then yes, you need to download the Activate template into C projects and then configure it as a build project or a master project. When you use the app to generate the plan from test packages, does it require T-bombs? No. When you are creating a test plan from this app, which I'm about to show you, you don't need T-bombs or BPCA or anything. It is directly looking at the relationships that we have in focus build, that is from test case to work package to requirements to business process and so on and so forth. I will show that in a few seconds. All right, let's go back home and then see if my solution documentation is still working and I can create a test. You know what? I'll go to the recording just to be safe. Requirements is not needed. Oops. Just give me 1 second. This also gives me an opportunity to show you where you can see the recordings. If you go to ALM and then look at Media Center and Demos, go to Media Center, and that's where we have all our recorded demos. Launch the ALM Media Center. While it loads, let me just see the question. Is that in the chat window? Do you plan to speak about fixed space process? No, I don't plan to talk about the fixed space process in Focus Build today. Let me jump to my demo structure for Focus Solutions, Focus Build. Let's see, I want to pick the ones from OpenSAP. Let's look at the test management ones and go to test preparation. which is where we will see the demo for test step designer. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to create a test case for a given process based on the solution documentation structure using this new app called Test Step Designer. Yeah. So for that, we go to solution documentation, pick a particular process. Here we are in sales order processing for ERP with all these process steps. And then we go down to the elements area, right click there, and then go to new, then select the test case. There are different kinds of test cases that you can create. What we want to create is the one which is of the type test steps, right? You can also create automated test cases right from this UI. Once I create, go to the create, it goes to the creation screen. It inherits the process name as the test case name. And then I now go into this test case. This is the test step designer view where you can create test steps and attachments and so on and so forth. I'm setting some attributes that whether test results are shared across testers or not. If they are shared, then one tester can see the results of another tester for the same test case, right? And then we are still in progress. We can set an owner for this particular test case. Again, Agatha Boyer, the same famous user. You can give a description for this particular test case. Then some prerequisites, what are to be done. For example, test system should be available. Maybe some master data has to be created. We can mention all of that. What is the exit criteria? And then when we scroll up, actually, we see the test steps, and already 10 steps have been assigned here. Now, where did we get these? These test steps are coming from the process documentation for this particular process. Sales order entry, change sales order, delivery due date, all of them have been automatically added based on the solution documentation structure. You can delete some of these, edit, and then say, okay, delivery creation has to happen, and so on and so forth. You can add sub-steps to this particular step if you want to create sub-steps, and then say, how do you create delivery by entering the shipping point and so on and so forth. You can also change the numbering from 3 to 3.1 and 3.1 to 3.2. So this is an easy way of creating test cases instead of creating big fat Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. It's an easier way to manage. It's semi-automatically generated based on process structure. You can have instructions, expected results. You can have screenshots of attachments to show how to do this by clicking a screenshot for end users, for example, who have never seen Fiori. Maybe you want to create screenshots for them. And another important thing while this demo is flowing, you also see that executables are already assigned, create billing document, etc. Right? These are also inherited from the solution documentation when we are creating this kind of test case. You can also have language settings. That was quickly going on while we were talking. You can also change the language and type in German text or French text, etc., so that if another type of user is logging in with their language requirement being German or French or any other language, they can switch the language at the runtime when they are testing, and they will see the test instructions in that particular runtime. But of course, you have to provide the text here while designing it, and then the end user will find the text in the runtime as well, right? That's the language feature that we have here for test case descriptions. And then you save the test case, and now we have a test case that is created for this particular process against the solution documentation. Again, it was semi-automatically generated based on the structure. So this structure that you see here in the process structure, all these steps have been automatically added as steps in the test case it was created, right? So when I refresh here, you would see the test case appearing in the Elements tab here of the type test steps, right? So that's the test steps designer part. And then you can assign it into the work package or a work item, right? So here we go into the work package view or the work item view, go into the documentation tab. Just play this so that you know how to assign a test case to a test to work item. And then you can go down to the structure, and then you can link the test case that we just created to this particular work item. That's all. You just click that button and then it's linked. Now, why did it appear here? Because this documentation tab already has the business process inherited from the requirement to the work package to the work item. And now we went to SolDoc and directly created a test case. That test case automatically appears here. And then we've just made the association saying that, yes, this test case is needed to test this particular work item, right? And because we have that linkage, we are now able to trace the requirement directly to this test case as well. So that's that one. And the next thing I wanted to show you is this nice app that we have for test planning, right? Now, this is an app that we have for test planning. And this is a semi-automated way of generating the test plan directly instead of you figuring out what needs to be tested for a given cycle, right? So this is called Test Plan Management Assignment Analysis app that is there under the Test Manager role. And here what we do is we start with selecting a project, right? And then say I'm in this flight management project, and then selecting a wave after this. And once we select a wave, it immediately brings up the solution, branch, and scope elements automatically. So wave 1 has been selected here. And then when I click on assignment analysis and test plan generation, what it does is it does a lot of analysis behind the screens, right? What it is doing is it is going into the solution documentation and then looking at all the structures that you have in your solution, and then look at all the processes and their work packages that are assigned. So it is basically looking at the relationship between process structures, requirements, work packages, and the corresponding test cases that are there, and then showing you a view to actually see how ready are you for your testing for this particular wave. Because you selected wave 1, we are almost checking how ready are we for wave 1 testing, because we know what processes are there, what work packages are there. Here I'm doing a filter in this demo to find all the work packages which are to be tested, or all the test cases of a specific type you can filter, and then say, okay, now it filters down in this wave all the work packages that are ready to be tested, because we are not interested in the work packages which are still in development. We only are interested in the work packages which are to be tested. And then it shows, you can then select the work packages here and then say, I want to test these work packages or these structures, either from work package view or from a business process view. You can then select these processes and then generate a test plan directly, right? So it picks up all the work packages here. Here we're selecting the work packages, and then go to the test plan view and then say generate test plan. So what happens now is it looks at only those work packages which are to be tested, and looks at the business process association and the test case association. And if you want, you can also filter down to only types of test cases, meaning only pick up the test cases of the type integration tests, or only pick up test cases of the type UAT test cases. And then only those test cases, it picks up all of them and then generates a test plan for you, right? So what we are doing is we are leveraging the relationships that we have, and then picking a test scope based on those relationships. Now, of course, this test plan will be auto-generated. You can obviously edit it. You can add more test cases to it, remove some test cases from it before you start to do the actual test execution. Now, in this view, what also happens, this is a standard test plan generation view, but what also happens is that we have some smart features here where we can auto-generate test packages as well, right? And then you can say that what kind of test is it? Is it a FIT test or a UAT test, and so on and so forth. You can also classify that. Here we are running an FIT or integration test, so you can select that as a classification type. And the documentation type is selected so that only those test cases which are classified as FIT test cases are then picked, right? So then we move, and then you can auto generate test packages as well. So here we have multiple options. You can generate one test package for all test cases that are there in the plan, or one test package per work package, which means that you would have one test package per work package. Each work package will be tested separately, or you could have one test package for work package and classification combination, which means that one test package for all FIT test cases in this work package, one test package for all UAT test cases in this work package, and so on and so forth. Or you could have one test package per test classification, which means that you could have one test package for FIT test cases, another test package for UAT test cases, and so on and so forth. You can choose the options and then auto-generate test packages as well. So when you click OK here, a test plan is generated, and a bunch of test packages are also generated automatically from this view. And you can see the test packages that are generated here as well, right? And then you can assign testers from here, and then the testers will come and then start to do the testing as well, right? So this is a semi-automated way of generating test plans and packages, so that it uses the relationships that we have within Focus Build to actually generate the scope of a test, whether it is integration testing or UAT testing. You can also do that manually, which means that you can directly go to test plan management in Solution Manager Test Suite, create a test plan on your own. Then you can select the test cases directly by looking at the solution documentation. The only thing is that then you have to come back here for traceability purposes. You have to come back into this view and then assign the test plan manually, right? So that you have to do manually. Otherwise, you could also create test plans outside of this app that I just shown. Let me just go and then show the test suite dashboard. Maybe I show that here as well, just to be quick from the demo system perspective. This is how the test manager then tracks the testing, both from preparation as well as execution standpoint. So we click on from the tester view, launch the test suite dashboard. You select again a project for which I want to see the results, freight management, and a wave. And I want to look at the test plans under wave 1. And then select the test plans that are there under wave 1. Once I select the test plans, it generates the report on the dashboard. High-level overview, 2 test plans, overall 5 test cases, not a great example, but just to get you the picture, how you can track the overall progress of execution. Then you can also track the preparedness of it, or you can go to the execution status and look at what's happening with execution of these test plans, select a particular test plan, and then it shows how many are in initial status of testing, in progress, errors. When you click on that errors, it shows the test case, which is in error status. Then you could look at the defect status in the defect status view, and then look at number of defects that are open for the selected test plan, what's the status of those defects. And finally, you could also directly jump into the defect itself, or come back to the dashboard and I think the traceability metric somehow got missed out here. Let me just check if it's there. Okay, it only ends at defect. Let me see if traceability. Maybe I show it in the live system. I select trait management, wave 2, select some test plan. This is the overall status. If I go to execution status, then I see for a given status, I see the test result status from execution standpoint. More importantly, what I wanted to show you is this traceability metrics. Test plans. See if I can see the traceability metrics. Now, this is interesting because it looks at everything that we have created so far, from requirements to work packages to work items to transport requests to test case assignments to test execution, result status to defects and defect corrections, right? All of them are put together in one flat list. Here we start with project and wave that we selected, the requirements, if there are here, for example, this requirement here, this is the requirement ID, this is the requirement title, it is in realization, this is the business process node where it is created from, this is the work package, what is the status of the work package, how many work items are there, what is the status of testing. So if you scroll down, you will see some test results as well. What is the work item, what is the transport request that is created, the test plan in which it is what is the test case that is assigned, and everything, right? It's one big flat list for you to check the full traceability right from the requirement all the way down to the defect correction and the status, so that you can check whether every requirement is tested or not, right? This is extremely useful. We're still enhancing this as we go forward in terms of having multiple perspectives on this particular dashboard. You could also look at the high level overview from here, from these work packages, work items, why they are read, and whether they are tested or not tested, requirements, whether they're tested or not tested, whether a particular requirement has a defect. You see, we are leveraging all the relationships that we have in Focus Build to actually show this test dashboard. I think we are out of time. Quickly jumping to release management, I'll skip a few slides. Just wanted to explain about release management before I close the call. Release management is quite important. This is where we package and deploy releases into pre-production and production environment. It's a standard functionality in Solution Manager, which is leveraged by Focus Build as well. And it's always assigned to a particular project. So a project in Focus Build is always assigned to a particular release. Let me just, yeah, this one I will use. A release goes through various phases. In the prepare phase of the release, we are working on work packages. They're worked down, they are divided into work items, transports are created, work is being done. And then once all the work is done, then we build the release. Now this build is different from your project build. And in this build, the release will be packaged, dependencies are handled, transports are all put together, transport errors are all identified, and then it is deployed into the pre-production environment for the test phase. And in the test phase of the release, we will deploy the entire release package into the pre-production environment and then do the release testing. And here we could still create defect corrections, create defects for release level testing, and then create defect corrections. And those defect correction transports are also bundled into the same release. And then we go into deployment preparation, then deploy it into production, then we go into hypercare, and then go into operations phase, and then finally complete the release, right? So release is important. During the planned phase of the release, we are in this earlier stages of requirements and work packages. During the prepare phase of the release, we are in work package mode and work item mode, creating transports, testing the transports, doing UAT and other testing. During the build and test phase of the release, all the work packages going to handover release are picked up. All the requirements are marked into realize status. And then the release is deployed into the pre-production environment first, where test happens, and finally it goes into production when you want to finally deploy the release, right? So release management is important. Few last topics before I close the call. I just wanted to recap the architecture. That from process documentation, we create the requirements and work packages, work items. They are assigned to waves and sprints within the Focus Build projects. Release management happens over and above for transport management and release deployments. And then documents are stored back in process structure. Test cases are stored back in process structures. Based on these test cases, you create test plans and packages. And then everything is tracked in the solution readiness dashboard. Yeah. Few recommendations in terms of reviewing the Activate roadmap. Somebody asked this question as well, and then you can decide to use project management functionality in Solution Manager or not. If you want to try out Focus Build, you can try it out on the cloud instance using Cloud Appliance Library. You can go to Cloud Appliance Library and get an instance of Focus Build for yourself very quickly in a couple of hours. You can try it out like how I'm showing on my demo system, and then experience that. Then you can decide to use Solution Manager for your S/4HANA project. When to use Focus Build? That's a classic question. Again, if you have triceps and functional gaps, a lot of functional developments and transport requests are expected to be created, and you want to manage the build part of the project, and that's where Focus Build has extensive capability. So that's when you would choose Focus Build. Otherwise, if you're not doing much of build activity, then just having some process structures and leveraging the test suite is sufficient for you to use within Solution Manager. And then there are multiple t-shirt sizes, smaller, medium, and large projects. Smaller projects are just going with process management and testing. Medium projects are going with process management, requirements management, testing, and bits of focus build without transport management, meaning there is no release management, there is no charm and transport management, but you would create requirements, work packages, track the status, and so on and so forth, and also do testing, but you don't have transport management, right? So that's some projects are doing like that. And finally, the full usage, where you use everything that I have talked about in these 2 days, right from solution documentation to requirements to work packages, work items, and testing and release management as well. We do have a lot of partners who are trained in focus solutions, who have implemented focus build as well, and who help customers in these projects. So please leverage them if you need to actually help from any other consulting partner to help you with focus build. Another important thing is to have a dedicated role within the project to help with focus build, because as you can imagine, focus build is quite interlinked. There are a lot of interlinkages between different entities within focus build. Everybody has to use it correctly. Training might needs to be done, and so on and so forth. For all of this, PMO type role is required, what we call as methodology and tools coach. Right, and these coaches, this is a role that we recommend to be installed in the project, so that somebody who owns solution manager and focus build and ensures that everybody is trained, ensures that everybody understands and everybody is using it correctly during the project, and so on and so forth. It could be a part-time role within PMO, but this kind of ownership is required for the success of focus build projects. You could use a lot of materials, which I will also share more in my follow-up email. There's also curriculum that is available, role-based curriculum that's available for you to go through, and also the OpenSAP course. The link is available on the top of the slide. As I mentioned before, this is extremely useful. It's role-based. It's available in archives of OpenSAP, so I highly recommend this to be included in your onboarding of every project member, that they go in and at least take their role-based training, which means that if there's a developer, they take the developer training. If there is a project manager, they pretty much take the entire content, and so on and so forth. It's quite useful, and much of the demos that I showed are also part of this OpenSAP course. All right, that concludes my presentation. I will share this deck. I will share the links and the recordings of day 1 and day 2 as well with all of you. With that, let me just quickly jump to a few questions. Extremely sorry that we went over time, but we also started a bit late because of technology reasons. Test case management appears to be much better. Thank you for the feedback, Prasanna. For the test package generator, what happens if my document type has multiple document types? Example, for model company and OST from practice, would it still work? It shows all the document types that are there in the system assigned to the project that you have selected. And based on that, you can select the document that you want to use. For which support level is traceability matrix available? It should be available from the beginning of focus build, SP2, SP3 itself, Rob. I can check and get back to you, but it should be available from the very earlier focus build support packages as well. It obviously went through a few revisions in the support packages, but the bare functionality has been there from the beginning of 7.2. All right, any last questions or comments before we close the call? Thank you for the feedback, Prasanna. I'll just wait for 1 more minute for any questions. Otherwise, we will close the call now. At least I will stop the recording.